like they got him a lot cheaper than I thought he would be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think certainly for San Antonio, it's kind of like if there's a walkaway deal, especially where you could revisit this in the off season here. I said it last week and I said it earlier. The hardest thing for front offices is to kind of show restraint. And when you show restraint based on all the draft picks that you had accumulated, the 12th first, and certainly your young players with Vassell and Castle and Johnson and Sohan, and not be able to put any of those in the deal and still retain the 2 Atlanta picks and the swap rights, in the future here, it's pretty remarkable as far as what they were able to do. Obviously, Sacramento was looking for, they do get a couple picks, 2 first, and what equates to 5 seconds. Then they were looking for a player, like Zach LaVine, who kind of keeps them in contention, trying to fight for a play-in. So there's really good job by San Antonio. It sets them up, certainly, if there's another move, whether it be this offseason. Certainly, you potentially have 2 lottery picks, which could be really enticing to add to this roster.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, Bobby, you're not hearing about the Spurs. Have they gone quiet? Are they not going to try and do anything before Thursday? You think this is it for them?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the deal wasn't just to get, you're not making deals just to get into play. You're looking at deals long term. There is always a kind of a knee-jerk reaction because whenever there's a deadline, people react differently. I think you could certainly figure out. I think the smart thing, and I said this even if they hadn't gone out with De'Aaron, figure out kind of who you are as a team, who fits around Victor. And I think that's the thing to do is kind of, you go into, use the last, 35, 40 games, see how this relationship works, what other pieces that we have to add in the offseason, and then go out and figure that out. The worst thing you want to do is, trade in Atlanta first, one of those picks here, and the player you get doesn't work out here. So I'd be surprised if there's another, big move up their sleeve as far as when we get closer to Thursday.
Interesting. Bobby Marks from ESPN joining us here on the Blitz. I was thinking kind of honestly the opposite, since you still have a Keldon and you still have so many picks. The need for another big with the departure of Zach Collins is certainly there. But as you study the Spurs roster, what do you look at that you think they need to target, whether it's by Thursday or at some point in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably hit it right on the head as far as, getting some depth there. Certainly in your front court, I think you have to figure out, some of your younger players that you've picked, whether it be Wesley or Branham, as far as how those guys kind of fit long term, as far as where you are there. I think I know I understand the point as far as that you'd like to try to go out and do something again. You just got to be careful. You don't. There's not a deadline where you have to basically spend all your money at once. You can certainly save some of your assets, because there's always going to be a team or teams, or always going to be a disgruntled player that's going to want to be traded this offseason here. And I think if you use them all by Thursday, you're just not going to have enough, liquidity to go out and get a player.
Bobby, I know fans think of things a lot differently. We're more knee jerk than the guys in the front office, that's for sure. And the guys in the front office have to make those difficult decisions. I look at a player like Keldon Johnson, and
Mm-hmm.
I was very high on Keldon when he got here, and I thought, man, this guy could really be it. It seems to me, I'm speaking as a fan, Bobby, keep that in mind, that he's hit a ceiling. How do you know when a player has done all he can do for your franchise?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you go through kind of a progression, right? Usually it's, the first 4 years you're on that rookie contract. And then when you get to year 5 and year 6 and they basically have leveled off, that basically could be who that player is. Certainly there are situations where a player goes into to a different environment and it maybe has a different role and it really take off. But you usually have a pretty good understanding as far as what type of player you have, as far as, sometimes you max out on from a developmental standpoint, so That's the end goal. I mean, I think as far as, where you are, certainly, with where Keldon is, I think kind of the role, where he is, and he's probably in a 6-man role. The good thing is he's on a really good contract that you could use to move if you wanted to.
Bobby Marks from ESPN here on the Blitz 94.1 at San Antonio Sports Star. The rumors about De'Aaron Fox coming to San Antonio have been circulating for several days now. When you finally saw what the trade was, all the pieces and parts and what was leaving San Antonio, were you surprised from your seat, or is it kind of what you thought it might be?
No, it's thought of what it might be. I think, listen, a week ago when the Fox news broke, and I talked about it on TV, I tried to put myself in the perspective of Sacramento and say, hey, this is what I would want. This is what I would want. And I know you're not going to get it, whether it be Castle or Johnson, and the Atlanta picks, and certainly the Chicago pick was part of this deal that went to Chicago, back to Chicago. But when you kind of digest it more, and you put yourself in a position of where San Antonio is, where you can say, hey, this is our best offer, we're going to walk away from it. And basically now you're left in Sacramento with somewhat of a distraction of a player that likely would ask out in the offseason. This is kind of what I thought the pick package was. I thought maybe you could have maybe squeezed another first, Adam, considering that Charlotte first is really not a first because it turns into 2 seconds. So yeah, I mean, the AD stuff caught me off guard. That's what catches you off guard.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah. What the return was not. It didn't catch me off guard just because of the landscape of kind of where we are with everything.
All right, Bobby, you're the perfect guy to ask in, as you brought it up, because I've been asking everybody and nobody can make any sense of that trade.
Yeah.
What in the world's going on in Dallas?
Well, it's it's an extremely aggressive general manager. When you look at what they've done the last 3 years, they basically they turn over their roster consistently, and then certainly now it's the biggest chess piece on the board with Luka here. I think there's a lot of different layers to look at it. I mean, there's the layer of certainly there's a relationship with Nico being back his days with Nike and having a relationship with Anthony Davis already. There's a comfort level as far as getting that type of player and that type of person in your building. The identity where they are preaching defense certainly comes into play. There's the layer of you could have put them on the open market and you could have got a lot more. And I don't think Dallas was looking for 7 draft picks. They're looking for a win now type player. But I will say this. The rules of the Supermax, which Luka is no longer eligible for, that's not for you to get deterred and trade a player that's 25 or 26 years old and is in the prime of his career. And the window in Dallas has certainly shortened. From trying to win a championship, where you have one player who's 32, the other one who's 31. You're in a win now position here. So yeah, it definitely catches you off guard. I would say this, and just going back to my days in New Jersey and Brooklyn, your own players the best. What's under the hood of the car as far as who they are, injuries, personality wise, how they fit in better than the other 29 teams. And I think for Dallas, certainly there was certainly concerns as far as paying him 5 for $345. Based on fitness, health, and all that. Is it the right move? Man, for the people in Dallas, it better be the right move. For that front office, it better be the right move because the fans there aren't going to give you a mulligan on this one. When you have a generational player like Luka is, I mean, a guy that could retire right now and walk into the Hall of Fame.
I mean, I look at all of that. If the guy wants to eat a hot dog and drink a beer during a timeout, I don't care. Just go do Luka things on the court. I mean, and then you look at the return, and Anthony Davis is certainly no slouch, but they got rid of Luka. From a GM standpoint, in your time working in front offices, it almost feels like, GMs are talking and you don't take that serious, but they did. But from a Dallas standpoint, they only dealt with one team, Rob Pelinka.
Yep.
They didn't try to get the highest bidder. How often does that happen? And I mean, it almost feels like, man, malpractice might not be the right word, or maybe it is, but how do you not put that out there and try to get the most you can for a player like Luka?
I just think that Dallas knew. I think they knew who they wanted, right? They knew they basically wanted one player, and that was Anthony Davis. And they basically circled him. And yeah, I understand that it's an extreme rare case. I would say it rarely happens. I think what will happen now, though, is there's always that hesitancy when you're in a front office, right? I remember just going back in my days with the Nets, and I would tease Billy King, and I would say, Billy, call the Cavs and see if LeBron's available, right? And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if teams now are just more comfortable saying, hey, call the Celtics and see if Jaylen Brown's available. You know, like where you would never have before, because unless you ask, you just never know, right? So I think that could be an interesting trend that we might see. But you're right. I mean, I think you could have also done nothing, right? You could have also just said, let's get Luka back. Let's see where we are as a roster. Let's see where we are the last 35, 40 games. And then let's figure it out in the offseason to go out and do something.
So, Bobby, when you look at the Lakers now with LeBron and Luka, how do you see those two meshing, if you will?
I still think there's a lot of work to do. I think the roster that Luka left in Dallas was a lot better than the roster that he's walking into with the Lakers. You know, from a meshing standpoint, I think I'm more concerned, how does he fit with Austin Reeves in the backcourt? You know, certainly from a defensive standpoint, and our team's going to be targeting both guys. They need a center. Do they go out and get a center now, or they figure it out in the offseason here? I think certainly from a usage standpoint, the big question will be, does Luka have the ball in his hands more? How does LeBron fit into that? It's an interesting, it's an interesting dynamic, because for the first time in a long time, really Luka's the face of the Lakers moving forward. It's not LeBron. So it is an interesting dynamic to watch over the next 35, 40 games, and then kind of see what happens this summer.
Certainly get the week started off on a wild way with the trade deadline coming Thursday. Bobby, I know you're extremely busy. Appreciate you jumping on with us this afternoon.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Bobby Marks from ESPN on the Buyers Barricades guest line, where they provide traffic control, rental, and sales for San Antonio and beyond, online at buyersbarricades.com. And, of course, with De'Aaron Fox coming to San Antonio as a part of that deal,